All right, so hello and welcome back. So my epic history video is doing well, so I think you guys wanted more of that. So we're gonna take a look at the Battle of Yeylau. Last time was the Battle of Austerlitz, which Napoleon absolutely fucking smashed the Russian lines there. So without further ado, let's get to it.
An Epic History TV History March collaboration, supported by our sponsor, the Great Courses Plus. In December 1805, at the Battle of Austerlitz, Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French, won a crushing victory against the joint forces of Austria and Russia. Napoleon now dominated Europe, able to hand out spoils as he saw fit. In February 1806, he sent an army led by Marshal Massena to overthrow the King of Naples, who had dared to side with his enemies, and gave his throne to his own brother Joseph instead. Another brother, Louis, was made King of Holland. His German allies, Bavaria and Württemberg.
So before that, yes, so this is a theme with Napoleon going forward, and it started in 1806 and probably before then, honestly. So, as he said, he gave Naples to Joseph Bonaparte, okay, it's his brother, and then he gives the Kingdom of Holland to his other brother, Louis Bonaparte, okay? Now, he's going to keep doing this quite a lot, actually, and then he'll do it with some generals. But the big one is going to be the King of Spain when he puts his brother on the throne there. That is going to cause a massive amount of unrest. It's already going to cause a massive unrest in the Kingdom of Holland and Naples. Naples is a little iffy, a little more delicate there, but Kingdom of Holland, they, again, when you just install your brother on a throne and you're not even Dutch, then they have a problem with that.
And Württemberg were elevated to the status of kingdoms, while Napoleon made himself protector of the Confederation of the Rhine, a new alliance of German states that would contribute 60,000 troops to his army. In recognition of the new reality, Emperor Francis of Austria formally dissolved the Holy Roman Empire, founded by Charlemagne 1,000 years before, but now without influence or purpose. Austria.
So that's all very important. So let's take a look. First, Württemberg and Bavaria that sided with Napoleon, they got land out of this, okay? They also got elevated to statuses of kingdoms. They weren't kingdoms before. Back in the HRE, it was very hard to be called a kingdom. Like Prussia was Prussia was an example. They were like a duchy, and then the king was king of Prussia, but outside the HRE, because you can't have a king in the HRE. Long story short, HRE's dead. Now, this is a very big and important distinct thing that just happened. Again, the Holy Roman Empire has been around 1,000 years, and now it's over in 1806. All of Hanover, Prussia, and then some of Austria, they were all in the Holy Roman Empire. And now it has been broken into 1,000 pieces. Now, Napoleon is going to do the Confederation of the Rhine, which basically is just his version of... It's not the Holy Roman Empire, it's more centralized than that, quote unquote. But it's basically just him, having allied. Basically makes a whole bunch of states big, like Bavaria and Württemberg, and then, puts the rest into a confederation that's at least a buffering zone.
Austria had been humiliated. France remained at war with Britain, Sweden and Russia. But in the summer of 1806, all eyes were on Prussia.
Napoleon is a monster who has emerged from the mire, Queen Louise of Prussia. Now, we're going to get to Prussia. Now, everyone thinks, rightfully so, that Prussia is going to be militarily good. There are problems with Prussia in the 18th century. 19th century. 19th century, 1800s. And the reason is because after Frederick the Great died, the army was good for a little bit, and then it started to fall into decline and dismay. And then after the Napoleonic Wars, it's going to start ramping up again to avenge the defeat that they are about to suffer. Let's put it that way.
The Prussian king, Frederick William III, regarded Napoleon with deep mistrust and had been about to join the coalition against him when news arrived of its disastrous defeat at Austerlitz. He was heavily influenced by his wife, the celebrated and popular Queen Louise, who detested France and Napoleon. She led the influential War Party at the Prussian court. Matters came to a head over Hanover, a German state which had belonged to British King George III, been occupied by the French, and given by Napoleon to Prussia as compensation for other territorial changes.
This is important. The Kingdom of Hanover, this German state, is very important. Kind of factor into really British history. This state has been in the royal family of Britain for a very long time. A lot of the kings of England in the early days, again after 1066, when they actually moved from Hanover to England, they spoke German. They didn't speak English; they spoke German, and they continued to speak German for a very good while. And then eventually, again, Hanover, they lose Hanover, because they get it back after the Napoleonic Wars, I'm pretty sure, and then they eventually let it go and lose it. But yeah, Britain had an enclave on Europe, is basically what I'm trying to get at.
Now the Prussians learned that Napoleon had secretly offered to give Hanover back to Britain in exchange for peace. Frederick's advisors now persuaded him that war was the only honourable course. But Prussia then made a basic strategic blunder, sending an ultimatum to Napoleon without consulting its new allies in the Fourth Coalition. Their forces were too far away to help Prussia, who would now face Napoleon's Grande Armée with just the small state of Saxony for support.
Now, this is a big, major blunder. Again, they said, it is requires of honor, sir. You have dishonored us. He has dishonored us. He must pay. Yeah, cool. Honor's all great and all, but it doesn't fucking matter. So basically, they say, hey, Napoleon, we're going to send you an ultimatum. You either give us a shit or fuck off, or we're declaring war on you. And here's the problem. Sweden's out here. Britain doesn't have any guys on the mainland, and Russia just got his ass kicked and is back in Russia. There's no one to help him. He has to fight the entire French army by himself. Fun fact, not going to go very well.
Way to help Prussia, who would now face Napoleon's Grande Armée with just the small state of Saxony for support.
The funny thing about Saxony is, and Prussia and Saxony usually don't get along, and Prussia really wants to eat Saxony. You'll see this in the Congress of Vienna after the Napoleonic Wars. That this is true. So them actually joining them in a defensive alliance is, pretty. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Behind the fine facade was all the mildew. Karl von Clausewitz, a Prussian army officer, not just any army officer. He's one of the most important army officers. Again, with von Scharnhorst afterwards, him and Clausewitz are going to reform this fucking army, basically from not scratch, but damn well near it.
In 1806, the Prussian army had a fearsome reputation that dated back 50 years to the reign of Frederick the Great. Napoleon, a student of history, regarded it with respect. But Prussia's army had been allowed to rest on its laurels. Its generals were old, its staff work hindered by bureaucracy and personal rivalries, its movements ponderous and predictable. Prussian soldiers, however, could be relied on to fight with pride and determination, while Prussian cavalry was regarded as amongst the best in Europe. In October 1806, Napoleon invaded Saxony with an army of 166,000 men and 256 guns. Advancing in 3 columns, the French crossed the mountain forests of the Thüringer Wald, along roads carefully reconnoitred by scouts and spies. Napoleon intended to threaten Leipzig and force a decisive battle with the Prussian army, which he believed was near Gera. The Prussians were, in fact, further west, concentrating near Erfurt, on the west bank of the river Saale. Its commander, the Duke of Brunswick, had hoped to threaten the flank of Napoleon's advance. But wrong-footed by the speed of the French, he now ordered a retreat north to find a new defensive line.
So this is all just advanced maneuvers. Again, the reason you want to go for Leipzig instead of like Erfurt and Greta is they're just small towns. You go to Leipzig, it's at least a medium-sized town, maybe even a city at this point, and you have to force your enemy to fight there. And that basically is forcing an engagement, which is what Napoleon wants to do. You don't want to fight on the enemy's ground of their choosing. You preferably want to fight ground on your own choosing. And if you can't do that, you want to fight on ground that you both didn't choose.
On the 10th of October, at Saalfeld, Marshal Lannes' 5 Corps clashed with a Prussian advance guard commanded by Prince Louis Frederick, the king's cousin. The Prussian force was routed, and Prince Louis himself killed in combat with a quartermaster of the French 10th Hussars. 3 days later, Lannes made contact with a large Prussian force near Jena and sent news to Napoleon. The French emperor, believing he'd found the main Prussian army, rapidly issued orders for his corps to concentrate for battle at Jena.
So what Brunswick was trying to do is Napoleon's trying to go for Leipzig. He needs to stop him. So he's two options: defend Leipzig or try and cut him off from his own supply and reinforcements. If he can do that, cut Napoleon off, Napoleon has to basically go back and fight him there. Otherwise, he will run out of supplies and be starved and cut off from communications and everything from France. Or go to Leipzig and try that, but that's risky. So that's what he was trying to do, basically trying to force Napoleon to engage over here. Or cut his supply off.
Bernadotte's 1 Corps and Davout's 3 Corps were to cross the Saale and fall on the Prussian flank from the north.
And again, these other corps, again, perfect example, just fucking, you need to cross over here and then help me flank so that you can encircle the enemy. Again, 2 corps, when you split armies in the corps like this, you can see why it's very effective. These guys are not in corps yet. They'll learn eventually, but they're not in corps yet. If you can break off smaller units and detach them and then flank, you'll see what's about to happen.
But Napoleon was wrong. Lannes faced a 35,000-strong Prussian rearguard, commanded by General Hohenlohe. The main Prussian army, 52,000 men under the Duke of Brunswick, was further north, moving straight into the path of Davout's 3 Corps.
In warfare, there is but one favorable moment. The great art is to seize it. Now, this is very true. Basically, what it's saying here is you only get one chance. Like, if you see an opening in their lines, you only get the one chance, and you got to seize it to win. If you don't do that, you're not going to win, and you don't deserve to be on the battlefield commanding these guys. You need to seize the initiative and seize it very fast.
The Battle of Jena began at 6:30 a.m. on the 14th of October, in thick fog. Marshal Lannes' 5 Corps already had a toehold on the plateau west of the town and river. His first task was to drive back the Prussians and win room for the rest of the French army, arriving by the hour to deploy.
And he said he was on a plateau. If you don't know what that means, basically just it's higher ground than the rest of this. So he's up there, it's harder to get at, and you can start seeing from further distances.
His infantry led the way, and fierce fighting broke out for the villages of Cospeda, Closewitz, and Lützeroda. Meanwhile, Augereau's 7 Corps advanced through a ravine, emerging onto the plateau on Lannes' left flank, while Soult's 4 Corps climbed steep tracks to form on his right. Napoleon joined Lannes in the center of the battlefield, organizing a 25-gun battery to support the attack on Vierzehnheiligen.
Now you're going to see, this is very Napoleon-like in his early days. This is still his early days. And leading guys, not from directly in front, but, safely behind, but still engaging in battle like this. As the years go on, he will start to do this less and less until basically he doesn't do it at all.
The village was won, but then lost to a determined Prussian counterattack. On the right, around 10 a.m., Soult's infantry secured Closewitz, but was counterattacked on its right flank near Rödigen. A decisive charge by Soult's light cavalry drove off the Prussians, routing their infantry and capturing 2 enemy colours. As 6th Corps began to arrive on the plateau, its fearless but impetuous commander, Marshal Ney, ignored orders and dived into the fighting around Vierzehnheiligen.
If you don't know what the colors are basically their standard flags. You don't want to lose those. Those are the pride of your unit. It may be a bit hard to explain to some people. If you've done ROTC, if you've done cadets, if you've done in the military, you know what the fucking guidon is. Now, basically that, except it has the actual flag, and it has the regimental ribbons and all that shit, and you do not lose that thing ever. So when they say they capture the colors, it's very bad that happened. And Marshal Ney, ignores orders and charges in with, infantry. These aren't even cavalry. This is infantry, and you're gonna see he's gonna get flanked.
Becoming briefly cut off by a Prussian counterattack and having to be rescued by Guard cavalry. General Hohenlohe was expecting the arrival of 15,000 more troops under General Ruchel at any moment. Until then, he remained largely inactive, shoring up his line and ordering limited counterattacks. But he had run out of time. Napoleon had begun the day with just 25,000 men. By 12:30, a steady stream of reinforcements had brought his strength up to 96,000. As the Emperor rode past the Imperial Guard, one young soldier, eager to be sent into action, called out, "Forward!" Napoleon stopped and demanded to know who had spoken, then rebuked the soldier as a beardless youth who ought not to offer advice until he too had commanded in 30 battles.
And again, that is equal-tempered use, but this is the Imperial Guard. Now, Napoleon doesn't deploy his Imperial Guard often, really at all. It's a very last resort kind of thing. It's a tactical reserve. He has many tactical reserves, and he uses all of them. The Old Guard, basically there's going to be a young guard, middle guard, old guard. The young and middle are going to come later. The old guard is what they have right now, are the veterans that Napoleon had for a very long time. He doesn't like to send these guys in at all. But when he does send them in, they do very well. Just because they're really diehard veterans. And that's, yeah.
The moment had arrived. Although the Guard, to its frustration, remained in reserve, the other French corps were ordered forward in a general attack. The Prussian army began to give ground. At first it kept its discipline, but then disintegrated into a general rout. Murat's cavalry were launched in pursuit, riding down and sabering hundreds of fleeing Prussians. General Ruchel's 2 divisions finally arrived at the worst possible moment. They briefly held up 5 Corps' advance, but were soon outflanked, broken up by cannon fire, and charged down by French cuirassiers.
Now, French cuirassiers, if you don't know, they're the French heavy cavalry. They wear the breastplates. They got big breastplates on their front. They have cavalry sabers, and they have a fucking plume on their head. They're basically heavily armored cavalry. If you want to use a term, knights of this period, without the lance. Your marshal must be seeing double. Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, I think I could be wrong here, but this is Napoleon to Colonel Falcon. ADC means aide de camp to Marshal Davout. Aide de camp is basically not the second in command, but like his assistant, if that makes sense. Like, he's going to run orders and all of that crap for him.
Meanwhile, 12 miles to the north, near Auerstedt, Marshal Davout was marching southwest, expecting to fall on the Prussian left wing at Jena. Instead, he encountered the Duke of Brunswick's main Prussian army, heading north to take up new positions. Davout's 3 Corps, 27,000 men and 48 guns, was about to face odds of 2 to 1. While
Now, you never want to be doing this. And it requires some masterful tactician skills to win an engagement if you're going to, especially because you don't know what's coming and it's just going to happen in front of you. Many commanders panic and they mess up and then it's over. If you have the right skill, you can hold on.
Bernadotte's one corps, which had orders to support Davout, was nowhere to be seen. Davout, nicknamed the Iron Marshal, showed no signs of alarm. He formed his 1st Division into a defensive line centered on the village of Hassenhausen, his infantry forming squares to repel a series of cavalry charges by General Blücher's advance guard. His other 2 infantry divisions arrived to strengthen the line, standing firm in the face of repeated Prussian attacks. But Prussian movements were slow and poorly coordinated, nor did they use their numerical advantage to try and outflank Davout. At a crucial moment, the Duke of Brunswick was shot through the eyes, a wound that proved fatal. King Frederick William himself took command. Several Prussian units remained uncommitted, but the king, convinced he faced the main French army under Napoleon, dithered. Around 1250.
So, yeah, as he said, they had the numerical superiority here, and they didn't try to flank around. They dithered and weathered, and the commander of the army was shot and killed. Now, that is a big blow. Just right off the bat, there's a reason you should, as a general, not be directly in the front line, because if you die, then it goes to the second in command, and he may not know what the fuck is going on and where everything is. For example, the second was the king. Really, he was in charge all the time anyway, but he takes over, and he doesn't know where people are. He doesn't know the units. He hasn't talked to the commanders, blah, 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 blah. Long story short, you don't know where everything is. You're going to dither, and you're going to mess around. And that's exactly what happens here.
15 Marshal Davout counterattacked. The Prussian army turned and fled. Davout had won a stunning victory against the odds, but at a heavy price. His corps suffered 25% casualties, 1 man in 4 killed or wounded, while inflicting twice as many losses on the Prussians.
Now, that is a massive victory. Again, taking 25% casualties is really bad. Let's not make two ways about it. But when you're facing odds 2 to 1, and you win, and you drive them from the field, and you take that many casualties, that's really a really good victory right there. And again, Prussian casualties around 10,000. They got 3,000 prisoners, and they got 115 guns. Now, that is a massive stockpile of guns. That is a massive amount of equipment that they can use later on. That I can't really give you an equivalency, but think battleships worth of material was captured when you capture 115 guns. Tell the marshal that he, his generals, and his troops have gained my everlasting claims on my gratitude. Napoleon Bonaparte.
When news reached Napoleon that Marshal Davout had engaged and defeated the main Prussian army, he reacted first with disbelief, then heaped praise upon the Iron Marshal, later awarding him the title Duke of Auerstedt. Marshal Bernadotte, in contrast, was nearly court-martialed for failing to support Davout.
Now, Bernadotte is going to be a key figure coming up because he's Napoleon's. Really, he's his chief of staff. Sorry, never mind. Not Berthadotte. Berthier is Napoleon's chief of staff. So Bernadotte, again, almost court-martialed. Fair enough. He didn't come to support Davout, and Davout won without him. Also, the Duke of Auerstedt. He puts these titles out there. Really, that just means like the most famous dude that helped win this battle is what I get out of it, because it's not like an actual title that you own land and stuff. Not like that.
Napoleon's army began a masterful pursuit of the beaten Prussians, giving them no time to regather their strength. 2 weeks after the twin battles of Jena-Auerstedt, Napoleon's troops, led by Davout's heroic III Corps, entered Berlin.
And it's important to remember, as I said, Napoleon didn't give them time to rest. If they were able to rest or regroup, they could have formed a defense of Berlin, but Napoleon immediately went after their armies and tried to split them up and defeat in detail. Napoleon did defeat this army in detail, just not the way he thought he would. Let's put it that way.
The next day, General Hohenlohe surrendered at Prenzlau. At Lübeck, General Blücher and 20,000 Prussians were driven out of the city in heavy fighting and forced to surrender, while 25,000 Prussians besieged at Magdeburg surrendered to Marshal Ney. Prussia's army had been devastated by a Napoleonic blitzkrieg.
Not just devastated, it's completely wiped out. I mean, it's gone.
In just 33 days, Prussia had lost 20,000 dead, 140,000 prisoners, 800 guns, and 250 standards.
The standards of their flags. This is a complete wipe of their army. When you lose 800, yeah, you don't come back from this, let's put it that way. 800 guns is a ridiculous amount of artillery to take.
It was a humiliation that proud Prussians like General Blücher would neither forget nor forgive. Unlike Saxony, King Frederick William refused to make peace with Napoleon. He continued to hold out in East Prussia, trusting in the approaching Russian armies to rescue his kingdom. Despite another glorious victory for Napoleon and the Grande Armée, the war was not won yet. Napoleon Bonaparte was one of the greatest military commanders of all time. But who were some of the worst? Find out with the Great Courses Plus lecture series, History.
So if the rest of it is about the Great Courses Plus, which you should go check out. Other than that, again, at this point, Frederick is at Königsberg. His entire army is gone. I mean, you could argue that the French, shouldn't have surrendered in World War II because, they got to Paris and it was over, but there's many factors as to why that happened. But I mean, what are you going to do? The Russians either going to come help you or they're not. And maybe they go help you, and more than likely they're not. They're not going to help you. So, yeah. Hopefully you guys like my video, like my reaction to this video. Go check out the original in the description. Leave them a like down there. Otherwise, I'll see people next time.